Exactly. And that means also that you will receive this recording of this session in a follow-up email afterwards, okay? So that you can look forward to that. Hello, everyone. My name is Christina. I'm the European Programs Officer at the Wheel, and I'm very happy today to be here with a special guest, and that is Dr. Jane Kerrigan from the National Contact Point for the Irish MSCA program. Jane, very happy to have you here today. Thanks a lot for joining us and to be our special guest. Also, I would like to present my colleague Emily. She will be here for our tech support. So she will take care of everything in the background. Thanks a lot, Emily, for joining us today. And she will also monitor the chat and any technical issues you might have or questions you might have around that. So she's your contact here for today. That brings me to our agenda. So let's have a look at what we will cover in today's session. And as I mentioned already, we will send you the recording and also everything that we will present, all slides, all materials, in a follow-up email later today. So probably this afternoon already. We have 1 hour together. And these webinars that we run, these spotlight webinars, they are pretty simple format. So it's an hour and we have one EU program at a time. And today we will hear about the MSCA program. That's our focus for today. And the main goal is that we look at the question, what is in there for the civil society sector? So it is for you to get a quick overview, for you to get a sense, is this something for me? Is this program interesting for me and my organization? Is it a fit for what I'm anyways already doing? Or could I progress with my work actually? Is this a program that would help and support my work? And if you say after this hour, oh yes, this is really interesting for me and my work, for my organization, you know then also a little bit about it, you have like this basic knowledge, and then you know also where to look for more information, who to reach out to, and then possibly apply. So this is like this 1 hour will be dedicated to this question, what is in there for the civil society when it comes to the MSCA program. So what we will do is that we start with a short presentation by Jane. We will learn more about like the general information about the program. Afterwards, Jane and me will have a short conversation around a couple of questions, just to dig a little bit deeper into what is like more detailed information. Then it is your possibility to ask questions. So we will have like 20 minutes for this slot. If you already should have questions on the program for Jane or for me also during the presentation or during our conversation, you are very welcome to already put them in the chat, to write them up. As I mentioned, oh yeah, thanks. As I mentioned, my colleague Emily is here. She will collect those questions and then we will answer them in the Q&A session of this hour. And also, of course, you will have the possibility to voice your questions. But again, if you already say, look, I have a question, put them in the chat now, we will collect them and then you will get them answered. If it's a very individual question, very specific to something around your organization or your project, it is also a possibility, of course, to reach out to me and Jane afterwards, after this webinar. So if you say, okay, look, this is really specific and I would like to have a one-on-one chat about this, then we would be available. Just reach out then via email and then we would answer that. Okay, and then the last part is to finish up with the supports available from Access Europe, which is the framework program in which we do this webinar. And that it is already for me now, and I'm happy to hand over to Jane Kerrigan.
Great, thanks Christina, and it's lovely to be here this morning. And I suppose that question, what is the MSCA, is a really crucial question, I think, to ask. And it's an EU funding programme that funds funds researchers doing excellent research projects, but it has a particular focus on training, skills and career development. And it's named after the inspirational scientist Marie Curie, but it funds research in all disciplines. So I'm going to share my screen now and just kind of give you a brief overview of the programme. And Bear with me. It's always a leap of faith when I start sharing the screen. Is this okay, Christina? Can you see everything? Perfect.
Yes, absolutely. We see that. Perfect. Thanks, Jane.
So I suppose the MSCA allows host organizations to potentially train and host researchers at no cost. But I'll tell you a little bit of the background, I suppose, to the program first. So Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, or MSCA for short, they're part of the EU's Horizon Europe programme, which is the EU's programme for research and innovation funding. So they're an EU funding mechanism for excellent research and training activities, and they support the mobility of researchers between countries, sectors and disciplines, and they support researchers in acquiring new knowledge, skills and competencies. They're a really key source of European funding for research in Ireland across all disciplines. And they're the EU's flagship programme for doctoral education and postdoctoral training. So they support researchers from all over the world with a focus on their training skills and then career development. And I thought I'd give you an overview of some of the key features of the MSCA programme. So I mentioned that it supports research in all disciplines and domains. And I think that's important, but it also has a bottom-up approach. And by bottom-up, I mean that researchers themselves decide the focus of the problem they want to address. So there's not a predefined research problem that researchers have to respond to. And the MSCA is also what's we call the 3 I's, if you like, that international, intersectoral and interdisciplinary mobility. And it's about stimulating such mobility. Another feature of the MSCA is that it promotes very attractive working and employment conditions for those researchers. So the funding for the researchers themselves is very competitive and they're fully funded. And with MSCA, participation of the non-academic sector, which includes civic society organisations, is very much encouraged. So I'm really thrilled to get the opportunity this morning to talk to you about the MSCA and the potential it might offer your organisation. I thought I'd start as well with how Ireland did in relation to MSCA funding under H2020. So H2020, as you know, was the predecessor to Horizon Europe. And Ireland was successful in securing 1.2 billion euros in research funding. Now, that was the total drawdown for Ireland in H2020. But let's look specifically at MSCA. And it's important to note that of the many funding opportunities in H2020, Marie Curie was the most successful in terms of drawdown for Ireland. So organisations based in Ireland received MSCA funding of just about 197 million euro. And that worked out about 500 projects that were funded thanks to Marie Curie funding and about 1,400 researchers. So in terms of Horizon Europe, which began in 2021, we've secured already nearly 60 million in funding. And we're only 2 years in, so we're very hopeful for the future as well. And I share these figures not I suppose to bamboozle anyone with numbers and talk about millions and billions, but to really highlight the fact that there's a very good track record in Ireland of success with Marie Curie funding. And as a result, there's good knowledge that has been built up at national level, and very useful resources have been created, which will be of benefit to anyone who wants to get involved in Marie Curie funding. So you can see from this slide that there are 5 main Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, so MSCA actions, and they include the MSCA and Citizens Call, the Doctoral Networks Call, Postdoctoral Fellowships, Staff Exchange and Co-Fund. So the MSCA and Citizens Call is a public engagement call. So for the purposes of this talk, I'm just going to concentrate on the other 4 MSCA actions, and they fund research and research projects. And of the 4 research and innovation actions, international mobility is a key principle. So researchers will be coming to Ireland. So there are 4 types of these R&I MSCA funding, and each target different objectives. So they range from the more individual calls, such as the postdoctoral fellowship, And that's an individual fellowship call in which a pre-identified researcher applies with a host organization, and together they work on the application. But you can have more consortium type calls, such as doctoral networks and staff exchanges. And then we also have the MSCA co-fund call. And I think a really useful way to think about those 4 types of funding is to actually think about what do you need as an organization. And so if you are an organization that's looking for a highly qualified postdoctoral researcher to work with you, you might think of the postdoctoral fellowship as an option, or you might be interested in joining an MSCA co-fund as a partner. So a postdoctoral fellowship is one in which the pre-identified researcher applies with the host organization, and together, so the supervisor and the host organization and the researcher work on the application. And there are eligibility criteria attached to the researcher, including mobility one. So for example, in the European Postdoctoral Fellowship, the researcher can't have worked or studied in Ireland for more than a year in the last 3 years before the call deadline. So you can see the international mobility part coming in here. And apart from being a host organization, it's also possible to get involved by hosting a secondment. And a new feature introduced into the postdoctoral fellowship is a non-academic placement. The researcher might apply with a university, a supervisor in a university, but they want to include a non-academic placement. So these are all options for ways in which civic society organizations can get involved. Now, if you're looking for a postdoctoral researcher, you might also be interested in joining an MSCA co-fund as a partner. So a co-fund, as the name suggests, is one which an organization which has existing funding applies for the EU to provide co-funding to run a doctoral or postdoctoral program. So in essence, the successful applicant becomes a funder and they launch a postdoctoral call or a doctoral call. So practically speaking, applicants to co-fund tend to be organizations who have funds at their disposal, have an ability to leverage existing funds. They may already be existing funders, if you like. So it may not be feasible or desirable for anyone listening to this talk to become an applicant for a co-fund, but it could definitely be an option to become an implementing partner or an associate partner. And I'll talk more about participation later. But I thought I'd take this opportunity to mention that you might have heard of Dorothy, which is a co-fund that is open currently. And the co-fund proposal was one in which a funder, the Irish Research Council, in collaboration with other funders, so the Health Research Board and the Environmental Protection Agency, they applied for MSCA funding to this scheme, and they were successful with the Dorothy proposal. And as a result, they're going to fund 25 postdoctoral researchers who will conduct research into public health crises. And the IRC's call, and I've included the link there at the bottom, they have on their website listed a number of organizations who've expressed an interest in hosting secondments. And this might give you an idea how to get involved with existing co-funds. So you'll find on the link many of these organizations from the nonprofit and research sector, including organizations like TASC, ADHD Ireland, Concern. So another opportunity to get involved. So that was I suppose the first 2 calls, but your organization may want to be part of a more consortium type organization. So a staff exchange could be useful if you want to broaden the horizon of existing research staff and build a research network or consolidate one. So it involves organizations from the academic and non-academic sectors coming together to write a proposal with an overarching research objective. So it has to be a research proposal, and the research projects are implemented through these staff exchanges or secondments. So there's lots of mobility with this particular call. It's not limited to postdocs or PhD students. It involves existing research staff within an organization. So it's not hiring new staff. And then doctoral networks will be of interest to applicants who want to develop an excellent doctoral program. But it's also of interest to organizations who want to be involved in training a new generation of innovative PhD candidates from abroad. So a doctoral network proposal will involve recruiting a PhD candidate, but also involves training and research activities between participating organizations and secondments. And this is where, as an organization, you can decide how you'd like to participate, because there are different ways to participate in MSCA projects, depending on your organization's capacity. And capacity, and according to what's feasible for you. So you could participate as an associate partner. For instance, you could participate in a network without recruiting a researcher. So you might provide training, for example, or you might host a secondment or co-supervise a doctoral student. So an associate partner would still be involved in the network or the consortium, but they wouldn't sign a grant agreement and they wouldn't receive direct funding. And a more involved partner would be a beneficiary, and they receive direct funding to recruit, host, supervise, and train a researcher. And then you could decide you want to be more involved than just a beneficiary, and that would be a coordinator or lead beneficiary, and they coordinate the proposal preparation and the successful implementation of the project. So there's a number of different ways to be involved. And I thought I'd mention some of the benefits for organizations getting involved in MSCA. And certainly it's a way to access talent, and the quality of researchers who apply for Marie Curie funding is high. So it's a very cost-effective way to do research that aligns with your research needs and will also strengthen your organization's research and innovation capacity. It's also a way to build and develop international links and intersectoral links, and allows you to potentially access state-of-the-art technologies and infrastructures. And of course, it's a great way to increase your organization's visibility and profile. I thought I'd share too, just in this brief overview, details of upcoming deadlines. But I'm really just sharing this with you to let you know that the research and innovation calls that I mentioned, they happen every year. So the MSCA and Citizens Call is the exception, so that runs every 2 years, but that's the public engagement call. But the other calls that I mentioned, they run every year, and there's great predictability in that. So MSCA is great for long-term strategic planning at an organizational level. I thought I'd give some examples too of MSCA projects that have been funded and with civic society organisations. So the first example on the left is of a postdoctoral fellowship, and that funding was awarded to Tala West Childhood Development Initiative, and they were given the funding to host a researcher for 2 years. So the funding was made up of the researcher's salary, and the EU also gave funds to the institution to cover the costs of the researcher's training and networking needs, as well as funds for the management of the fellowship. And that research was investigating the relationship between parental support and poverty. And the researcher was supervised by the CEO of Tala West CDI and also an academic in Trinity College. So in this case, Tala West CDI was the host organisation, if you like, the coordinator, and the associate partner was Trinity College. And the second example I've given here on the right is a RISE project. Now, RISE has been, some of the names have been rebranded under Horizon Europe to make them more, I suppose, to make the names say really what they are. So RISE is now known as staff exchanges, but it's essentially the same call. So the coordinator in this particular project was from UCG, and the project involved academic and non-academic organisations coming together as part of this international and intersectoral network of organisations to collaborate on a project. And this project looked to design a technology-enabled patient care pathway and to develop interventions at key points along Huntington's disease trajectory. So in this case, the Huntington's Disease Association was a beneficiary. So it received direct funding for its research staff to go on a secondment to other organisations within the network. You can see in the slide I've included the Cordis link, so you can access further information about those particular projects and who the other partners were. And finally, I'll just finish with some contact details. So myself and my colleague, Dr. Yvonne Halpin, are the national contact points. And I've included in this slide details of our Twitter handle. Please do follow us. We post regular updates. We also have our email contact details here. And we have a YouTube channel too, where you can have access to previous webinars that we've done on very specific calls. So I'm going to close this, stop sharing now, close the slide presentation. And yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. Great. This was good to get an overview and also to have this very specific focus on the civil society. So what is in there for those organizations and what could they do and what would be their role? And I took like the question of what do I need, that this is like a very important question that every organization should ask themselves before they apply, to say what is actually the right fit for me, right? Of all the projects you just and programs inside of MSCA that you just mentioned.
That's it, exactly. Because I think finding what's a good fit is probably half the battle, really.
Yes.
And knowing kind of what it can offer and the different potential avenues for getting involved. And I think it allows you to at least have that conversation with people. So we included just to, I suppose, get the conversation going and get people thinking about what do they need and what would they like to get out of this program, and whether that's a good fit for between the two.
Yeah, so you would recommend organizations to first have an internal meeting saying, and as a first step say, okay, where are we right now? What do we want? What do we need? And look then at the programs, and then maybe as a second step, contact you. So would you be able to help them find out what is the right fit for
Absolutely.
their specific situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's anything in the overview that kind of sparked an interest, that thought maybe this could be for our organization, we're very happy. Myself and Yvonne very happy to tease this out further. And sometimes all it needs is a quick meeting on Zoom or a cup of coffee to figure out some details and to just give people enough information so they make informed decisions about what they whether they're going to prioritize this funding scheme or it could be part of their own strategic research plans.
Okay, I see. And what I was interested in when I was listening to you is actually, is it hard for you to find those host organizations in Ireland? Because you mentioned that you have like this huge track record. So there seems to be an interest of researchers to come to Ireland. Is it in balance, or is it hard to find these host organizations?
Yeah, so it's a question. Many of the host organizations in Ireland, I'm thinking particularly for the postdoctoral fellowship, would be universities. And even within the university sector, we often get that question: how do we find the right person?
Yes, exactly.
So they feel it too. So there's a number of ways people can try and find the right researcher for their organization, and that the researcher can find the right organization for them too. So we have a number of matchmaking forums. So I have an extra slide that we'll send around afterwards that gives you some other opportunities. So where you can promote your organization through Euro Access, and you can advertise for a researcher once you've worked out what your needs are, research needs are. This is if you want to be a host organization yourself. And also our NCP colleagues around Europe have developed another matchmaking forum, which is something similar. Again, you can advertise. Now, anecdotally, we've heard that often people find the researcher and the host organizer, they find a good fit through their own network. So to asking, so if you are working with academic organizations or even non-academic, if you have links across Europe, is to make them aware that you're open to the possibility of discussing MSCA funding and how you might get involved. And that often leads to these, if you like, matches being made. But I'm certainly definitely send the information, but I'm happy to tease that out with people as well and to find that match. I mean, it's all about finding that perfect match. So you're going to be, an organization could be the perfect organization for another perfect researcher, and it's getting the environment right so that you can both meet and work together.
Yes, exactly. This is also what I was thinking about, that you're probably working in a very specific area. So like, how do I find this one person? But as you just mentioned, there are like tools and platforms out there. And of course, there's also you, so that you have a possibility to match and find the right ones. This is actually a very important part probably of that.
Yeah, and I should say, Christina, if people are involved in other European funding programs, that can often lead to, I mean, there's synergies between different programs. So we know Erasmus Mundus, for example, and many of you might be familiar with Erasmus. There are links there, so consortium types. So there are links definitely to be made. So if you are active in Europe, in European funding, that's often a good place to start, is with your existing networks.
That's true, because you often actually already have maybe partners that are from the academic sector. So you already are in those networks, and maybe you have those contacts and could like explore those. That's true.
Exactly.
Yes. And you mentioned these two examples from where like civil society organizations would host researchers, which I found super interesting. So would you have any other examples? Or what I would also like to know is what maybe you know of these organizations, what did they say afterwards? Like what were like the outcome after the project, these 2-3 years that they hosted the researcher? And do you have any experiences that they shared with you and said, this was like perfect because we could do this and that, we couldn't have done it without that?
Yeah, so there have been a number of successful projects involving civic society organizations across the four schemes that I mentioned. So for the postdoctoral fellowship, we know Irish Traditional Music Archive also hosted a fellow for 2 years. And I was delighted to see in, I think it was 2022, so last year, with the staff exchanges program. So Irish Music Traditional Archives were also a beneficiary with a staff exchanges program. So I think sometimes we find when organizations get involved, they stay involved, even if not in the same scheme, but another action within Marie Curie funding. And I think that shows you the value of it. So in the postdoctoral fellowship, that organization hosted a fellow, and then in the staff exchanges, they were a beneficiary, and that project was coordinated by Spain. But we've lots of other examples as well, depending on where organizations are at. So in the doctoral networks call, which is very much a call that's creating a network of PhD students who are doing really innovative research, and the training program is really a strong part of that. There was Trinity College led a project, and the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre was a beneficiary in that project. And also Sperazi was another group who was also a beneficiary in that one. So they were looking at deficiencies in psychotraumatology and training and innovation. So you can see how those organizations fitted in. We have another example of the organization Fighting Blindness was an associate partner in a doctoral network that was led by Southeast Technical University. And they were looking at the treatment of training PhD students in the treatment of eye disease. So you can see how the inclusion, I suppose, in a network, it has to align with your research needs. You can see how it can be a good fit for those organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see also that like the range of topics is very broad. So you have like, you cover really a lot of aspects. So they could be like links.
Absolutely. And that's because it's the bottom-up nature of it, which is really terrific. So it's totally researchers deciding what is the gap of knowledge and what's needed. And then a strong feature of Marie Curie funding is that collaboration, it's that intersectoral collaboration between academia and non-academic organizations, and that very much includes civic society organizations and industry. So what Marie Curie funding could do for an organization is that it could involve you in a network in which you have access to great expertise in academia, but also outside of academia. So expanding your own network and collaborating with people in industry, maybe in other civic society organizations, but also then within academia too, which can lead to possibilities, other research funding possibilities, or even beyond research. Those collaborations can often be very helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jane. I see that there are actually like a lot of questions already in the chat. So maybe we turn to them now, and let's see if we can answer them. And let's give a little bit of space to our audience, to the people in the room. I would have a look very quickly what we already received. Sorry, my chat is not open. Okay.
I'll have a look too.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. That was already super helpful. I think it makes really sense to dig a little bit deeper into these programs and to fully understand it. Oh yeah, so there is a question from Dr. Angela May Banbury. I'm just reading this. Let's see if we're able to answer it. Yeah. Would this funding program help support an exchange program between PG students, universities in the USA and Ireland? We have the beginnings of a specific project in mind based on the development of oral history. We are a not-for-profit in ACL. I'm not, this is probably also involving the questions, can researchers, is there a link also to other countries than the EU outside of it, or do we have just, okay.
Yeah, there is definitely, and staff exchanges is a good program to consider. They're all actually could be included, but some countries would have to supply their own funding.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would apply then to America then as well. So the staff exchanges program, for instance, there might be other, Angela, there might be other programs that might fit better. You could make something fit here, but so staff exchanges would fund maybe PhD students, but it wouldn't fund master's students. And there would have to be a research project. But also then, because it's funded, given funding to the EU and associated countries, to Horizon Europe, there are countries outside that who may be eligible for funding, but they're low and middle income funding, so it wouldn't include America. So now they could send students or send researchers to America. But America would have to supply the American entity would have to supply the funding to do the same. So there might be, it might be an exact fit.
Exactly. So and I see also that it's including, like the question of Angela's including a little bit other aspects. Angela, if you would reach out afterwards, maybe then we can see if there's like a fit for that. But I think that is an interesting question, if actually also researchers coming to Ireland from other countries than the EU. But this is great. Thanks for answering that. I have another very interesting question. What are the common pitfalls? So is the funding simple to administer? Do you know from those civil society organizations that were involved, like what were the main struggles, or were there struggles? Probably if you do that for the first time, I can imagine that it's something new and
absolutely
complex.
Yeah, so I think if you're starting for the first time, I would there's different ways to participate, but being an associate partner might be the route to go down. So you don't sign the grant agreement, and it means you're still involved in the project, but your involvement will be limited. And with that limited involvement, the responsibilities are limited too. So you wouldn't be involved in official reporting. So if that was a concern, definitely think about the associate partner route. It's also, the budget is done by unit costs, which we are told is simpler. So you don't have to, so the funding is very transparent what the funding people get. But like all EU funding, I think it does involve administration, and there is a learning, I think, and institutional knowledge is then built up by the more you do. I think I'd really be hesitant about advising people to go down a coordinator route unless you had a lot of experience with EU funding and you were very comfortable with the administration load that it brings. And so very much be thinking about associate partner as a way to get involved. If it was a good fit and you wanted to be a beneficiary, I think definitely we could help tease out some of the things that you would need to do in order to support you better in implementing the project, and on some tips maybe we could share on that.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is actually also general recommendations that we give when it comes to EU funding. If you start with it, you should have like if you would aim for, let's say, higher scale projects or programs that have more complexity in it, then you should have already experience with EU funding. So you should start like slow and build it up. But it's really, that's probably a very individual thing for every organization to assess to see where am I right now? So what am I able actually to do, and how much experience do I have in that space? Very important question. I would read out the next question. It is from Dave. And I hope we can help him here. may I ask, is it possible through the program for a researcher to be assigned to research participation, engagement, and community representation with the local government and decision-making bodies across the EU states? I'm not sure if this is a very specific question.
Can you run that by me again, Christina? So
yes, it is for a researcher to research participation, engagement, and community representation with local government. So how I understand the question is that it is about like how is the relation and the link to the government, to decision-making bodies. But that is probably, I think this is a very specific question. Maybe Dave, you would like to ask it and to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. It really is to get a snapshot of communities across the EU and participation engagement within their local authorities and what types of representation they may or may not have. I'm specifically looking at the PPN model here in Ireland, where we elect community representatives to sit on decision-making structures. But I don't know of any similar model across the EU, and that's why I'd like to maybe get a bit of research done and have some common partners and that kind of thing, just to get, you know, an idea of what is out there, because we really know very little across in the EU states about, you know, community participation and engagement with the authorities. You know. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Dave. I can see where you're coming from. So this is a research idea.
Yes.
So there's a few different ways. So ideally, you'd want to, if you're doing a postdoctoral fellowship, you want to attract a researcher who's also is thinking along these lines as well. And then you could either host them. If you make it very specific, so one of the things about the research is they have to add to what current knowledge is, and to make it something that the EU will be interested in funding. So it's a way of, now, if you think of other European colleagues that you have or might be thinking along these similar lines here, that could be a way of doing this, the staff exchanges that I mentioned too. Or the other option I'm thinking of is that postdoctoral fellowship. Again, you'd have to have a researcher, pre-identified researcher, who's going to come into Ireland and going to do that research. So for very operational research or operational, I suppose, actions, this isn't, Marie Curie funding isn't a good fit, but it is good for that. When you see a gap in knowledge like that, Dave, that you know, there might be something that you could work on with that, and Marie Curie funding could be a way to try and address that gap.
Great. Yeah, I see that as well. It's about the research idea, actually. And also, again, always when it comes to EU funding, to make it in alignment to actually EU policy and what is the EU interested in funding. That is always the most important aspect. And also, like, is increasing the success for your application. Coming to success, there's an interesting question from Lachlan Scott. What is the success rate of applications from Ireland, if you happen to know that? And also, would you be more likely to be successful with an application if an NGO has an academic partner?
Okay, so there are different success rates for the 4 different actions. So it really depends what action you're going with. And Ireland has a good track record. So, but these are competitive calls. I feel I have to say that Marie Curie funding is competitive. So for example, for the postdoctoral fellowship call, I think the success rate in Europe is about 17%, and we were just over the 20% for Irish organisations who were hosting a fellowship. So that was very good news, and those success rates have improved in recent years, which is great. So you don't get an extra benefit if the NGO is the host, so it'd be marked the same as if it was a university as a host. But if an NGO is involved in an application, so say it's hosted by a university, if an NGO is involved in that application, they're offering a non-academic placement or a secondment that adds additional value to that application. This is where that the postdoctoral fellowship proposal will gain extra points, because you can really show how you're increasing the impact and adding value to that particular project. Success rates for doctoral networks is around about the 15%. And then, but a key part in doctoral networks is to be competitive. When we say this to our university colleagues, to be competitive, they need non-academic involvement. So they need industry, civic society organizations. So it's very important for them that you would be involved. And of course, staff exchanges is it's crucial. It's all about that link between the academic and non-academic involvement as well. So I hope success rates don't put people off, because it can be very off-putting when you see success rates under 20%. But again, that might be another reason to think about like the coordinator is responsible for putting in the proposal and developing the best proposal they can. But if you go in as an associate partner or a beneficiary, again, your involvement is less onerous. You still get an opportunity to shape the proposal, but you mightn't have that same level of work and pressure, and it can be a great place to start.
Absolutely. Yes. I often think it's right now really the time of the civil society and the NGO sector, actually, because as you said, especially in research projects, programs also like Horizon Europe, it's nearly like mandatory to have a civil society non-academic partner. So we actually should use this opportunity, which is out there, which has never been bigger, to make that step and finally to become involved into that. Just adding this.
Yes, no, you're so right. And we know even for you'll notice I talked about doctoral networks, for example.
Yeah.
We know from data a lot of PhD students, they might want to end up in academia, but they don't. The data shows they don't. So they need exposure to the non-academic sector. It's actually much better for the researcher, but also very much in Marie Curie, it's about that two-way transfer of knowledge that you could gain for them. They will definitely gain from being in your organization, but the ideal is that you also gain from them. So there's that exchange, if you like, that transfer of knowledge.
Yes, thank you. So I have a question from Sean from the organization Shine. I read it out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The nature of our organization's work tends to be attractive to early career researchers. So we have a lot of employees working in entry-level positions while actively training to become researchers. However, these employees will often move on from our organization when their training is complete. Is it possible to utilize this funding to create a research position and retain these kinds of staff? That's probably very specific.
It's specific, yes, but I don't think it could be used in that way. So yeah, I suppose it's very much it's about doing excellent research, but it's also about that training skills and career development of those researchers, mm-hmm. Not to create a permanent post. So there will be for fellowship or doctoral net, you're recruiting someone for a period of time, and then you would have to come up with additional funds to keep them there if you like, and because of the mobility, your existing staff, they would be going somewhere else if you like to avail Marie Curie funding. Even with the staff exchanges, they'd be going somewhere else and then maybe coming back. So it mightn't be a best fit for that particular query.
Okay. Yes. It's a very specific case, I guess. Thanks for this question, though. So I have one from Francis. What is a typical time range of funded projects? I saw 2-3 years as a possibility to host a researcher. I remember that from your slides.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Francis. That was that's a good question to remind me of the timeline. So for the postdoctoral fellowship, European fellowship is 2 years, and you can add an additional non-academic placement for 6 months. So that's, again, they're all fully funded. So we would lengthen out the length of time. For a global fellowship, I want to thank my colleague Yvonne there, who added into the chat about remind me of the global fellowship. This can be 3 years as well. So this is where the length of time increases. The doctoral network program is generally 3 years, except if you're doing a joint doctorate you're involved in a joint doctorate consortium, which is longer. Sorry, the projects are funded for about 4 years, and then the funding for the PhD students 3 years, and a little bit longer for the joint doctorate, and the staff exchange is 4 years. So that's the timeline. But it's useful to think of timelines here, because of course with European funding, a person might apply for a postdoctoral fellowship call in September, and it generally takes about 5 months before results come through. And then it could take, for the grant agreement is signed and the person is able to start, it could be another year. So this would be part of a strategy, if you like, maybe a mid to long-term strategy.
Absolutely, definitely, it's a long-term strategy, and in any case, that's what we also see with other EU funding programs. Very often it takes a long time until actually there are results and there's a decision. So we have 10 minutes left. I think we have answered probably all the questions in the chat. I hope so. I would give one person, if you would like to have the possibility to speak up now and ask a question directly. If there's anyone who would like to unmute and come in here and voice your question, would there be anyone interested in doing so? Or are all questions answered? As we said, there's one question actually on the partnership building and how do I find the right researcher and the right fit. But this is what you said, Jane, already. You will share these extra slides, and there are platforms and there are possibilities to find. Absolutely. Because I can imagine it's one of the most important questions.
Absolutely, and I'm very happy to follow up myself, and Yvonne, very happy to follow up with people as well. So there will be additional information on the slides of how to develop be part of a consortium, and just to get you thinking along those lines. But we're happy to follow up with any queries. A lot of information, I know, and maybe hopefully one of my aims was to give people confidence, maybe to talk about Marie Curie actions to people within their network, and to explore it a little bit further and to start those conversations. We have also, feel free to contact myself or Yvonne by email. We have also on our web pages, on the website, we're based in the Irish Universities Association, so our IUA webpage. We have lots of resources, training material if you want to explore it a bit further. But again, very happy to do a quick Zoom call or a virtual coffee and to talk it through in a bit more detail as well.
No, excellent. Great. Thanks so much, Jane. So it's my last call for any last questions here. Otherwise, as you heard, Jane and Yvonne are there. You can reach out to them via email also, and you can find more information also on their social media channels or on their website. They have a newsletter also, so there's a lot of information out there to get an overview or a virtual coffee. I think if everyone is fine, then I would close this and say a huge thanks to Jane. Wow, thank you so much. So much information in 1 hour.
Thank you,
was amazing.
No, it was great. It was great.
Absolutely.
And it's lovely to hear the questions. Yes, and I hope I get to meet some of the audience in person at some stage.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so sure. Look, these spotlight webinars are often like the start, right? To just get an overview and to get a sense, okay, is this really interesting for me or not? And then you can follow up and can see, okay, now I understood it a little bit better. So that's why we're trying to do that with each EU program actually out there to see, okay, it's because it's so much and there's so much information, sometimes you just don't know which would be the right fit. So I hope some people here in the room today know a little bit better and say, yeah, this is something that I would like to go for and would like to learn more about. Excellent. Again, thanks so much. Also, just letting everyone know, Access Europe, of course, is also here to help in case you say, yeah, this is interesting, but I would like to maybe look into other EU funding programs. You're always very welcome to reach out to me and to my colleagues. We're here to help you to get an overview of EU funding, to scan which EU program would be a good fit. We have a website, we have a newsletter. I will put that in the chat in a second, and also social media channels. So in case you first would like to explore more, what is EU funding all about and what do I have to do, then Access Europe is here to help you with any other supports. And also I would like to announce the next webinar in this series, and that will be with Travis O'Doherty from the Northern and Regional Western Assembly. He will present on 2 Interreg programs on 30th of June. It's not up yet there on our website, but we just confirmed it with him this week. So Travis will tell us on the 30th of June about Interreg Northern, Interreg Atlantic Area and Northern Periphery and Arctic. So 2 Interreg programs who work on across borders, actually in the border regions, which could be maybe also interest for you. Just letting you know this, we will put all of this in the follow-up email. I said that, I mentioned it already. We'll send the recording around, we will send the presentations around, and also more information about more events like this, and also about Access Europe. So I would close it here then now. Thanks a lot again. Thanks for everyone for joining us today and for this conversation. And hope you have a nice long weekend with a lot of sunshine.
Bank holiday, everyone. Thanks very much.
Enjoy bank holidays. Bye-bye.